The forest was half asleep when the sky decided to break. Aaron had been hacking away at a stubborn log, his axe biting into the damp wood with a sound that echoed through the pines like someone splitting the night in half. He wiped his brow, muttering a curse at the tree for dying crooked in the first place. It wasn't exactly a glamorous life, no crowds, no applause, just the occasional argument with a squirrel over ownership rights to acorns. He straightened up, stretching his back, and was about to call it a day when the forest lit up in silver. Not moonlight, something sharper, faster. A bright streak cut across the horizon, trailing a tail of molten blue. It moved so low he could almost hear it hum. Then came the sound, deep and rolling, shaking the earth in a way no thunder ever could. Ah, he muttered, staring up. That's either the gods throwing tantrums again or something I can sell for scrap. The ground trembled, and from far beyond the ridge came the crack of impact. Birds screamed out of the trees in a panic, and even the stubborn fox that had been raiding his chicken coop bolted like its tail was on fire. Aaron stared into the dark, the glow flickering through the trees like an invitation written in lightning. Most sane men would have gone inside, barred the door, and said a polite prayer. Aaron wasn't one of those men. He was the kind who thought, well, I'm bored anyway. He grabbed his lantern, an old thing held together by more luck than metal, and started walking toward the smoke curling into the night. The air grew hotter, the smell sharper, not quite fire, not quite metal. Something electric, like the forest itself had caught a fever. By the time he reached the clearing, the trees were still hissing from the heat. The crash had carved a wide scar through the earth, a long, uneven trench glowing faintly. At the end of it sat, well, not a rock. Not any rock he'd ever seen. It was a shape that didn't make sense, smooth and twisted all at once, like molten glass frozen mid-spin. Its surface pulsed with veins of blue light that ran in patterns too precise to be natural. Sparks drifted off it like fireflies that didn't know when to quit. Aaron stood at the edge of the crater and whistled. If this is someone's idea of a bonfire, they overdid it. He climbed down carefully, boots sliding in the soft soil. The heat hit him first, not the burn-your-skin kind, more like standing too close to a forge that hummed to itself. He poked the hole with the blunt end of his axe. The light flared. Oh, great, he muttered. Now it's alive. He was halfway through debating whether to run or apologize when a sound came from inside, faint, rhythmic. Not metal contracting. Breathing. Hello, he said, because that's what one says when addressing mysterious glowing meteors that breathe. The response was a low, mechanical sigh. Then a hatch, or something pretending to be one, hissed open with the weary groan of a door that hadn't been invented yet. Steam poured out, and through it came a shape, slumped and small. Aaron froze. It was a woman, or at least mostly a woman. Her skin shimmered faintly, as if dusted with starlight. Her ears curved upward in elegant points that would have made any elf jealous. Her hair, tangled and silver-white, caught every glimmer of light like spun glass. She took a step forward, stumbled, and fell straight into his arms. Aaron blinked, holding her awkwardly. Right, he said. So either I've inhaled too much sap today, or you're real. Her eyes fluttered open, eyes so deep and strange they looked like someone had trapped galaxies in them. She looked at him as though trying to calculate what kind of creature she'd just encountered. Then she said something that sounded like the hum of stars colliding. Yeah, that's about how my last relationship ended too, he muttered. She didn't respond, only winced and clutched her side. The glowing veins under her skin dimmed. Aaron noticed blood, or something close to it, a faint silver sheen on her clothes. All right, don't die on me. I can barely keep a fern alive, much less, whatever you are. He shifted her weight and began hauling her up the slope. She was lighter than she looked, like carrying smoke wrapped in silk. By the time they reached his cabin, he was drenched in sweat and mildly convinced his spine was now shaped like a question mark. Inside, he laid her on his bed, the only one he had, and muttered an apology to the universe. He poured water into a bowl, tore a piece of his shirt into a rag, and started cleaning the wound. It didn't bleed much, more like it glowed faintly under pressure. All right, he said softly, half to himself, you've either got really fancy blood or I'm going to wake up in the morning with a third arm. The woman stirred, whispering a word that sounded like KLNAR. He frowned. Gesundheit. Her hand moved weakly, fingers brushing his wrist. A low hum vibrated through his skin, not unpleasant, just strange, like holding onto the purr of an engine that wasn't built here. The lantern flickered. The hum grew stronger. Every metal thing in the cabin, nails, axe head, pot handle, began to rattle faintly. Aaron yanked his hand back. Okay, we're setting some boundaries here. No glowing. No vibrating furniture. That's where I draw the line. The hum subsided, and she went still again, her breathing shallow but steady. He sat back on the floor, staring at her in disbelief. Stars falling from the sky, space ladies in my bed, furniture singing, and I haven't even had dinner yet. He looked out the window. The crash site still glowed faintly through the trees. Something about it itched at the edge of his mind, like it wasn't finished. Like it was waiting. He sighed. Nope. Not my problem. Tomorrow's problem. Future Aaron can deal with glowing space debris. He pulled a blanket over her, checked the latch on the door twice, and sat beside the fire with a cup of weak tea that suddenly felt much too ordinary for the evening he'd just had. The forest outside was quiet again. Too quiet. Then, faintly, far above the clouds, a pulse of light flickered once, twice, like a signal answering another. Aaron didn't see it. He was staring into the flames, muttering to himself. If anyone asks, I just found her while chopping wood. Definitely not harboring a shiny alien fugitive. Definitely not. The kettle whistled softly. The sound made him jump. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. Stars fall out of the sky, and I still flinch at tea. He didn't notice the faint glow seeping from beneath the blanket. Didn't see the symbols tracing themselves gently along her skin. Didn't see the single droplet of liquid silver roll from her fingertips and sink into the cabin floor, where it pulsed once like a heartbeat before fading. Outside, the forest hummed. Not with wind, not with life, but with something new. Something listening. Aaron yawned, too tired to make sense of anything. Welcome to the forest, he mumbled toward the bed. Try not to blow it up while I'm asleep. He leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, unaware that his old clock had stopped ticking, its gears frozen mid-turn, and that, somewhere deep in the trees, the soil still glowed faintly blue. The stars above the forest shifted, almost imperceptibly, as if realigning themselves around something small, impossible, and sleeping in a woodcutter's cabin. Morning came reluctantly, dragging pale light through the window like a guest who wasn't sure they were invited. Aaron woke to the sound of something humming, faint but steady, as though his cabin had developed a heartbeat overnight. For a moment he thought it was his stomach protesting last night's soup experiment. Turnips were not meant to taste metallic, but the sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and froze. The woman, the one who had literally dropped out of the sky, was standing in the middle of the room, barefoot, staring at his kettle like it was a piece of divine technology. The blanket he'd tucked around her was pooled at her feet, her silvery hair a tangled constellation around her face. She turned when she felt his gaze. For a moment they just stared at each other, him, unshaven and bewildered, her, radiant and eerily calm. Then she pointed at the kettle and said, "Energy, container?" Aaron blinked. "Teapot." She frowned slightly, repeating the word as though it were an alien formula. "Teapot." Then she crouched down to examine it closer. "Small engine. Converts heat to flavor?" "Well," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "that's one way to describe breakfast." She looked up at him again, eyes flickering with faint light, and he realized she was learning. He could see it, tiny shifts of her pupils, quick, mechanical flashes of cognition. It was unnerving and fascinating in equal measure. "You learn fast," he said. "I took 3 years to figure out how to boil eggs without explosions." She tilted her head. "Eggs. Explosions. Not same. Depends on the cook." The woman straightened, one hand brushing her side where the faint glow of her wound had dimmed overnight. He noticed her posture, graceful, measured, but fragile underneath. Her gaze darted toward the window, where sunlight spilled across the table. She raised her hand slowly into it, watching the light break over her skin like water. "Warm," she whispered, and smiled. The room felt smaller when she smiled. Aaron cleared his throat, mostly to remind himself he was still capable of making sounds. "Glad to see you're feeling less glowy." Her brow furrowed. "Less glowy? You were doing a bit of a lantern impression last night." "Not that I mind, it saved me some firewood." She nodded solemnly, as though accepting this as a reasonable medical observation. Then she began to speak softly, words still halting, strung together like beads on the wrong thread. "Ship, broken. Sky, silence. Must hide. They, follow." The words sent a chill through him despite the morning light. "Who's they?" She looked at him for a long time, then traced a circle in the air with her finger. Tiny motes of light followed the motion, forming a small, hovering image, a starfield. In the center, a cluster of sleek, dark shapes moved like sharks through the void. Aaron stared at the floating image, nearly spilling his tea. "All right, I take it back. My problems are officially not that bad." She closed her hand, and the projection vanished. "Hunters," she said quietly. "They find signal." Aaron pointed his thumb toward the forest. "You mean the shiny crater you left back there?" "Oh, they'll find that. It's glowing brighter than my aunt after 2 cups of mead." "Must stop signal," she said, urgency sharpening her tone. He exhaled, setting his cup down. All right, but if I end up vaporized, I'm haunting you. She didn't get the joke, but nodded earnestly anyway. They walked back through the forest, the morning mist curling between the trees. Aaron carried his axe, not for chopping this time but because it made him feel slightly less insane. The woman, Lyra, he decided he'd call her, since glowing space lady didn't roll off the tongue, moved with an odd mixture of grace and wariness, her eyes scanning everything like she was cataloging it. At the edge of the crater, the wreckage still pulsed faintly. The air shimmered above it like heat haze, but colder, sharper. Lyra knelt beside the hull, pressing her palm to its surface. The light flickered in response, almost like recognition. Still alive, she murmured. Lovely, Aaron said. We'll invite it to dinner next. I'm sure it eats logs and sarcasm. She didn't react. Instead, she began whispering something under her breath, the same musical language he'd heard before. The metal responded, lines of energy crawled across it, shifting patterns, dimming as though her voice was pulling the light out of it. He crouched beside her, keeping a safe distance. So, you're turning it off? Sleeping, she corrected. No, more, signal. Good. I was worried we'd get company. I'm not much of a host. The last guest I had was a bear. She looked up, alarmed. Bear? Big furry thing. Loves berries. Hates people. She considered this, then said, same on my world. He blinked. You have bears? Not anymore, she said simply, and the way she said it made the air go still. For a moment they were quiet, both staring at the dark, silent ship. Aaron kicked a pebble. Well, that's depressing. So, how'd you end up crashing here anyway? Wrong turn at the Milky Way. Her lips curved slightly, uncertain but amused. Storm. Energy wave. Warp, fold collapse. I run. Running from those hunters, I assume. Yes. Her eyes grew distant, almost sorrowful. They want core. Core of what? She touched her chest, just above her heart. Here. He blinked. Well, that's dramatic. Power, she said. Old. Forbidden. They destroy to keep. Destroy to keep, he repeated. That's bureaucracy all over the galaxy, huh? Her expression didn't change, but he swore her eyes brightened slightly at the hint of his tone. Maybe humor wasn't universal, but she seemed to understand its shape. They walked back toward the cabin, the forest quieter than usual. The birds hadn't returned since the crash, and the air felt charged, alive in a way it shouldn't be. As they passed a stream, Lyra paused, crouching to watch her reflection ripple. I look different, she said softly. Aaron shrugged. Well, you've got the whole mystical celestial warrior thing going. I mostly look like I lost a fight with a shovel. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. You, strange. I get that a lot. By the time they reached the cabin again, clouds had gathered overhead. Lyra sat near the fire, studying the flames with fascination. Every few seconds, small sparks would leap higher than they should, almost as if the fire itself recognized her. He busied himself fixing something that could pass as lunch, tossing vegetables into a pot and trying not to think about cosmic bounty hunters. So, he said, stirring, you've got alien powers, shiny blood, and angry pursuers. Anything else I should know before my cabin gets vaporized? She tilted her head, thinking. I know like cold. Great. We've got that in common. He set the food down between them. She watched him closely as he ate, then tried to mimic him, awkwardly scooping up soup with a spoon like it was a weapon she wasn't sure how to hold. When she tasted it, her expression turned politely horrified. Flavor, anomaly, she said carefully. It's called cooking, he said. Took me years to master that particular anomaly. She considered him, then said, you help me. I learn. Learn what? Stay, she said softly. Be small. Be quiet. Be human. The words hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't sure if she meant disguise or desire. Maybe both. All right, he said finally. We'll start with walking upright, eating terrible soup, and pretending we're not on some interstellar wanted list. Piece of cake. She frowned. Cake? He grinned. Oh, you'll like that lesson. Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere far off, low and restless. The fire flickered, shadows stretching long across the cabin walls. Lyra lifted her gaze toward the window, her eyes glinting faintly as though something unseen had passed through her mind. The sky listens, she murmured. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Tell it to mind its own business. She smiled, really smiled this time, and for a heartbeat, the cabin seemed brighter. Neither of them noticed the faint shimmer that rippled across the tree line beyond the clearing, like a mirage taking form. Somewhere above the clouds, silent and invisible, something moved, triangulating a signal that should have been impossible to find. But for now, the forest was quiet, and the stars beyond the storm waited patiently for the next mistake. By the third morning, Aaron had begun to suspect that Lyra was either going to improve his life immeasurably or burn down the forest by accident. Possibly both. He woke up to find her crouched on the floor, surrounded by every metallic object he owned: pots, nails, a horseshoe, 2 spoons, and what had once been his favorite kettle. They were floating. Not dramatically, not even very high, just lazily drifting in a slow orbit around her, humming faintly like bees drunk on lightning. "Right," he said, scratching his head. "So this is normal now." Lyra looked up, smiling faintly. "Testing resonance. Your metal sings." "I was rather fond of it being quiet," he said. "That kettle's been through enough trauma without joining your alien choir." She tilted her head, not understanding the joke, and the kettle promptly lost altitude, crashing into the floor with a mournful clang. She frowned. "Still learning, gravity." Aaron sighed. "Aren't we all?" She was improving, though. Her speech had become clearer, her movements more human, though there was still something unearthly about the way she carried herself, like she was constantly half aware of dimensions no one else could see. When she walked through sunlight, motes of dust seemed to follow her, and when she laughed, a rare, startled sound, the air itself seemed to hum in approval. He tried not to notice how the cabin felt emptier when she stepped outside. That morning, Lyra asked to see more of the forest. Aaron hesitated, remembering her tendency to make things levitate or glow without warning, but she looked at him with such quiet insistence that he found himself nodding before logic could intervene. They set off under the tall pines, mist curling around their boots. She walked slowly, fingertips brushing bark, moss, stones, absorbing everything as if it were sacred. Birds flitted through the canopy, their songs cautious but curious. "This place," she said softly, "is alive, different. It breathes. It also bites," Aaron said. "Don't get too close to the stream, leeches have a taste for tourists." She raised an eyebrow. "Leeches? Small predators?" "Small but enthusiastic." She nodded gravely. "Noted. Avoid small enthusiasm." He grinned despite himself. "You're catching on fast." As they walked, she began gathering strange-looking stones, humming faintly under her breath. When she had about a dozen, she stopped, arranged them in a circle, and tapped the air above them. The stones pulsed softly, light running between them like veins. Aaron watched, impressed and slightly alarmed. "You're not summoning anything, are you?" "Because I'm short on guest chairs." "Power grid," she said simply. "Primitive design, but forest helps." "Forest helps?" "That's reassuring." She stood, brushing her hands together. "This world, balanced. Energy flows easily. Trees remember." He raised an eyebrow. "Trees remember what, exactly?" She looked at him, eyes calm and distant. "Everything." He decided not to pursue that line of thought, mostly because it made him feel like he should apologize to the entire forest for all the firewood he'd ever chopped. When they returned to the cabin, she asked for tools. He fetched what he had, mostly blunt and rusted things that had seen better centuries. She accepted them without complaint, dismantled a broken lantern, and began constructing something on his table. "What are you making?" "Converter," she said. "To stabilize me." "Stabilize you? You seem stable enough. You even eat soup now." Her expression was patient. "Atmosphere here is thin in charge. My body needs flux to live. Without it, I will fade." Aaron felt something twist in his gut. Fade as in, die? Fade as in become light. Then, gone. He tried to make it sound casual. "Well, we'll just have to keep you charged, then." She nodded, focusing on her work. Blue sparks danced between her fingers, welding fragments of metal with impossible precision. Every once in a while, she muttered calculations under her breath, numbers that sounded more like music than math. By the time she was done, the device looked like a cross between a pocket watch and a tiny star. She held it to her chest, and the light inside her skin pulsed brighter, steadier. Her shoulders relaxed. "Better," she murmured. Aaron exhaled, realizing only then how tense he'd been. "Glad to hear it. For a second there I thought I was about to inherit your glowing spaceship problem." She tilted her head. "You worry?" "Of course," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "You owe me a new kettle." Her smile was small but genuine. Det noted. That night, as they ate by the fire, the cabin seemed unusually peaceful. Lyra sat across from him, studying the flames with that quiet fascination he'd come to recognize. Every so often, she would glance toward the window, eyes reflecting starlight. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Up there, I mean." She hesitated, then nodded. It was vast. Cold. Beautiful. But full of silence. Here, there is noise. Life. Some would call that chaos. Her gaze softened. Chaos is warmth. He laughed quietly. That's one way to justify my cooking. She tried another spoonful of soup, grimaced, and said, still chaos. The sound that escaped him was somewhere between a chuckle and a sigh. You're lucky you're charming, or I'd make you cook next time. I can try, she said earnestly. No explosions, maybe. I find your optimism concerning. Before he could say more, a low hum rippled through the floorboards. The lantern flickered, dimmed, then flared again. Lyra froze, head tilted as if listening to something far away. What is it? He asked. Not forest, she said. Different, signal. Searching. He stood, heart thudding. Hunters? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes unfocused, pupils narrowing to slivers of light. Then she whispered, they are close. Aaron grabbed his coat. All right, options. We can hide, we can run, or I can politely ask them to leave while holding an axe. Hide, she said quickly. Signal still weak. If they cannot see, they move on. Good. Hiding I can do. I've been avoiding tax collectors for years. She didn't get the joke but seemed relieved by his confidence. They doused the fire, covered the windows, and waited in darkness. Outside, the forest was silent again, too silent. Then, faintly, came a distant whir, mechanical and smooth. Something moved between the trees, unseen but enormous. Aaron held his breath. Lyra's hand brushed his arm, her touch cold and steady. He looked down, and she mouthed one word, wait. The sound passed slowly, fading toward the river. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Aaron exhaled. Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Lyra didn't smile this time. Her eyes were still fixed on the window. They will return. They always return. He poured them both water, pretending not to notice his shaking hands. Then we'll be ready. Or at least slightly more awake next time. She looked at him, expression unreadable. You should leave. Hunters destroy what they cannot understand. He snorted. Story of my life. But no. I'm staying. Someone's got to keep you from melting my cookware again. Her lips parted, as if to argue, but she said nothing. Instead, she placed her palm over the small converter at her chest. The light dimmed slightly, as though she were conserving it. Later, when they finally lay down to rest, Aaron stared at the ceiling, listening to the forest breathe. Somewhere beyond the trees, something mechanical hummed faintly, distant but patient. He turned toward her. Hey, Lyra. She opened her eyes, faintly luminous in the dark. Yes? Next time we go for a walk, can we not attract murderous space robots? She considered this. No promises. He sighed. Figures. Silence stretched between them again, but it was a softer kind this time, less fear, more understanding. He thought about her words earlier, chaos is warmth. Maybe that was what this strange, terrifying, wonderful thing was becoming, chaotic, warm, alive. And for the first time since the star fell into his forest, Aaron didn't feel quite so alone. Outside, far above the clouds, a small, angular craft adjusted its orbit. Inside, machines translated strange readings from the surface. The target's energy signature was faint but not gone. It would not remain hidden for long. But in the cabin below, a woodcutter and an alien woman slept side by side while the universe quietly closed in. Aaron woke up to the distinct smell of smoke and the even more distinct realization that the smell was coming from inside his cabin. He bolted upright, tripped over his boots, and stumbled into the main room, where Lyra stood over the stove, holding what could generously be called a culinary disaster. The pan was glowing faintly blue, its contents emitting a noise somewhere between frying bacon and small-scale electrical failure. Breakfast, she announced proudly. Aaron blinked at the spectacle. Breakfast or battlefield? She tilted her head, confused. You said I should learn cooking. Yes, but I meant human cooking, not whatever galactic fusion experiment this is. He peered at the pan. Is it supposed to vibrate? She looked down. It hums when ready. He backed up a step. My food shouldn't hum unless it's praying. Lyra frowned, clearly offended by his lack of appreciation. You will like it. Nutrient dense. Funny, that's exactly what people say right before poisonings. Still, she handed him a plate, the glowing mess steaming faintly. Against all instincts, he took a bite. His taste buds immediately filed a complaint with his brain. It's, he said carefully, energetic. She smiled, pleased. Energy is good. Right. Because I always wanted breakfast that doubles as a power source. Lyra looked entirely unbothered, which made sense given she wasn't the one whose tongue now felt mildly electrified. She sat across from him, spooning more of her own dish with perfect serenity. For someone from another world, she was adapting alarmingly well, especially when it came to ignoring his sarcasm. He set the fork down with exaggerated care. Lyra, Promise me something. If I start glowing, don't panic. Just, put me in the garden and tell people I died heroically. She raised an eyebrow. You exaggerate. Exaggeration's my best survival skill. After breakfast, which left a suspiciously ozone-scented haze in the air, Aaron stepped outside to clear his head. The forest was still damp from last night's rain, each leaf dripping sunlight. The crash site had finally gone cold, the earth around it no longer pulsed with alien light, though he could still feel a faint hum underfoot, like a sleeping giant dreaming beneath the soil. Lyra joined him, her hair catching the morning light. She carried a small device, a polished fragment of her ship, now fashioned into something resembling a compass. It pulsed gently in her palm, emitting faint tones. What's that? He asked. Locator, she said. Checks for signal traces. I made sure the beacon is silent. Good, he said. Because I'm running out of ways to explain glowing craters to the neighbors. You have neighbors? Technically. One lives 5 miles west and thinks I'm a hermit wizard. I try not to disappoint him. She studied him, brow furrowed. Wizard. Guy who talks to trees and mutters to himself. You are that. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. All right, can't argue there. They followed the edge of the forest down to the stream, Lyra's device beeping occasionally in small bursts. The air here smelled fresher, cooler. Aaron watched her as she knelt beside the water, submerging the device. Blue light rippled across the surface like liquid lightning. It remembers, she said softly. The stream? She nodded. It carries memory through particles. Even water here speaks. Right. That's comforting. So, if I ever insult it, do I get cursed with dry fish? She looked up, a tiny smile on her lips. Maybe. He liked that smile. It was rare, fragile, but it made the world feel less heavy. They stayed there a while, her scanning the water, him skipping stones and pretending not to notice how her reflection shimmered like a ghost of the sky. When she finally stood, her expression had shifted to something more serious. The hunters, she said quietly. They move closer. I can feel them. Aaron sighed. You're sure it's them? Could be tax collectors. Her expression remained perfectly grave. Tax collectors? Terrifying creatures. Wear bad suits. Travel in packs. I prefer hunters, she said. So do I, surprisingly. They headed back toward the cabin, and for the rest of the day, Lyra worked, if worked was the right word for someone disassembling machinery that shouldn't exist with bare hands. She turned fragments of metal into translucent threads, humming softly as they floated and fused. Aaron tried to help by offering tools, though most of his tools were about as useful as a hammer in a surgery. Careful with that, she said as he leaned too close to a glowing wire. I'm just observing. You know, scientific curiosity. Curiosity melts flesh, she replied calmly. He stepped back immediately. Well, that's me done observing. By dusk, she had assembled something that looked suspiciously like a miniature portal, or possibly a decorative death trap. It hovered a few inches above the table, humming faintly. What is it? He asked. Shield field. Will bend light and sound. Hide us from orbit. He blinked. You made a cloaking device, out of my cooking pot and some pine sap? Resourcefulness, she said simply. He let out a low whistle. Remind me never to underestimate you. Or my cookware. She pressed her palm to the device. The air shimmered faintly around them, just enough for Aaron to feel the pressure change in his ears. Field active, she said. He looked around. Well, nothing's on fire yet. I call that progress. It will last 2 nights, she said. After that, we move. Move where? Her gaze drifted toward the stars just beginning to appear between the clouds. Farther from sky watchers. He followed her gaze. Funny. I used to like looking at the stars. Now they just make me nervous. Do not hate them, she said softly. They listen. Yeah, well, if they're listening, I've got a few complaints. That made her laugh, a sound so unexpected it startled him. It was light, musical, and real. Later, as they sat by the fire, she studied him curiously. You joke often. It's that or panic, he said. Joking burns fewer calories. In my world, humor was rare. Then your world sounds exhausting. She looked into the flames, her expression distant. It was. We forgot how to laugh. We built machines that could smile, but not people who could. He poked the fire, thinking. Well, you're here now. Plenty of things to laugh at on Earth. Me, for example. She turned to him, her gaze soft but sharp in its sincerity. You make the dark smaller. The words caught him off guard. That's possibly the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Then people should say more nice things, she said, as if it were an obvious truth. He smiled, shaking his head. You're something else, Lyra. I am many things, she said matter-of-factly. That's fair. Night settled in quietly. The shield field hummed faintly, like a heartbeat under the air. Aaron sat by the window long after Lyra had gone, still in her half-sleep, staring at the trees swaying under moonlight. Every so often, he thought he saw flashes between the branches, like mirrors catching distant light, but when he looked closer, there was nothing. He told himself it was just his imagination. At some unknown hour, Lyra stirred. "They test boundaries," she whispered. He looked up. "What?" "The hunters. They skin edges of field. Curious creatures." "Curious melts flesh, right?" he said. She smiled faintly. "Yes." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Great. We've got cosmic stalkers playing hide-and-seek." Lyra's gaze softened. "They will not find us tonight." He nodded, pretending to believe her. When dawn came, Aaron awoke to find Lyra already outside, kneeling beside a patch of frost. She traced something into the ground, symbols glowing faintly before sinking into the soil. "Protection," she said when she noticed him watching. "Old pattern from my world. Makes space bend differently." "Good. Space could use some bending." She glanced up. "You are less afraid now." He shrugged. "I figure if I'm going to die, at least it'll be in interesting company." "Death is not certain." "It never is," he said. "That's the fun part." Lyra stood, her expression unreadable. "You make light of danger." "Someone has to. You're too serious for both of us." She studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "Perhaps that is why you found me." He wanted to ask what she meant, but she had already turned away, her gaze fixed on the sky. Far above, unseen through the morning haze, the hunters' ships adjusted formation, silent, patient, and still searching for the light that once fell into the forest. For now, though, the world remained still. A woodcutter and an alien shared tea and nervous laughter under the same uncertain sky, unaware that fate was quietly tightening its grip. The morning began with a noise that did not belong in any respectable forest. It sounded like someone had dropped a cathedral organ down a mountainside and then decided halfway through that it should also be a trumpet. Aaron sat up in bed so quickly he head-butted the low beam above him. Lyra didn't even flinch. She was already outside, scanning the horizon with that unreadable calm that made him feel like she'd seen far worse than airborne brass instruments. "That sound," he muttered, rubbing his forehead, "either the sky's ending or your friends have arrived for brunch." Lyra's ears twitched slightly. "Neither. It is a probe. Long-range sensory construct. Searching for energy fluctuations." "So, space drone." "Primitive word," she said, pressing 2 fingers to her temple. "But yes. A large one." "Great. And I thought the only thing hunting us today would be squirrels." He followed her outside, still half asleep, and immediately wished he hadn't. The thing descending through the clouds wasn't just a drone, it was a metallic behemoth, like a flying cathedral made of knives. Its hull pulsed with a low violet glow, scanning beams cutting through the morning fog. Lyra lifted her wrist device and began tapping rapidly. If it detects the shield residue, it will call the hunters. And if it doesn't? It will still call the hunters. Aaron sighed. "So, best case scenario, everyone dies politely." "Not necessarily," she said. "We could hide." He looked around. "Lyra, we live in a wooden cabin. The most advanced tech here is a butter churn. You underestimate butter churns." He blinked at her. "Are you making a joke?" Her lips curved slightly. "Maybe." She crouched and began drawing quick lines into the dirt, strange, looping patterns that shimmered faintly as she moved. Aaron crouched beside her, trying not to look like he understood absolutely nothing. "What's that? Alien Sudoku?" "Phase distortion seal. It will make us invisible for 3 minutes." 3 whole minutes? Fantastic. Maybe we can outstare it to death. The drone's hum grew louder. The ground trembled beneath them, leaves shaking loose from branches as a low wind tore through the clearing. Lyra's eyes flickered with blue light as she pressed her palms flat to the soil. The world around them shimmered like heat haze, and then suddenly everything went quiet. The drone passed directly overhead. Aaron could feel the vibration of its engines in his bones, like a giant cat purring death. He held his breath, afraid even the sound of his heartbeat would give them away. It drifted lower, its scanning light sweeping dangerously close. Then, without warning, a bird, an extremely stupid bird, flew straight into the beam. The drone emitted a shriek that could melt metal. The bird, now glowing like divine poultry, exploded in a puff of feathers. Aaron mouthed silently, "Rest in peace, hero bird." Lyra's expression didn't change, though her ears twitched again. "Field holding," she whispered. Seconds dragged on. The drone hovered a moment longer, then turned sharply and ascended back toward the clouds, leaving behind only silence and the faint smell of ozone. Aaron exhaled so hard he nearly fell over. 3 minutes. My new favorite number. Do not relax, Lyra warned. Its sensors tasted something. I didn't even know sensors could taste. They can. Now it knows the forest has been touched by off-world energy. He frowned. Touched? Like, how touched are we talking? Enough to bring them. Of course, he muttered. Can't have a peaceful week without galactic exterminators showing up. Lyra stood, brushing dirt from her hands. We must move soon. He looked around at his little cabin, the woodpile, the crooked chimney, the patch of carrots he'd been trying to keep alive despite the local deer conspiracy. You know, I was really starting to like it here. The birds, the quiet, the occasional interstellar fugitive. I am sorry, she said softly. He waved a hand. Hey, don't be. I always wanted to see the universe. I just thought it'd involve less running. They packed what little they could, blankets, dried food, a few tools. Lyra disassembled her cloaking device and stored its glowing core in a small metal case. The hum of it vibrated faintly through his bag as they walked deeper into the woods. For a while, there was nothing but the crunch of leaves and the distant chatter of insects. Then Aaron noticed something strange. Lyra? The trees are sparkling. She glanced up. Tiny motes of light were floating between the branches, like fireflies but slower, more deliberate. Each flicker left behind faint trails of blue mist. They follow the residue, she said. From what? From me. So, we're basically walking neon signs. Only if seen by certain frequencies. Great. So, invisible to normal eyes, visible to homicidal aliens. Love the balance. Lyra stopped abruptly. There is an energy node nearby. We can use it. Energy node? You mean like a power outlet for your people? Similar. Ancient relay left by those before us. Of course, he muttered. Because what forest doesn't have a convenient alien Wi-Fi hotspot? She ignored him and led the way into a narrow ravine. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. At the end of the path stood something that looked like a fallen obelisk, half buried in moss and stone. It pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of something sleeping under the earth. Lyra approached it reverently. This will work. For what? To send a misdirection pulse. If I invert the frequency, they will think we moved north. That's actually clever. You sure it won't explode? Her silence lasted just long enough to make him nervous. Lyra, he said slowly, I really need a straight answer before I help you press glowing alien buttons. She looked at him. There is a chance. Of explosion? Of success. That's not reassuring. She smiled faintly. I am learning optimism from you. Then I've doomed us both. They worked for hours. Lyra connected shimmering filaments between the obelisk and her devices, humming softly as she calibrated frequencies. Aaron fetched stones, tools, even pieces of his old saw blade when she asked. Each time he handed something over, the obelisk pulsed brighter, the forest around them echoing with faint vibrations. When the final connection was made, Lyra stepped back. Ready. Should I stand somewhere specific? Like far away? Close, she said. In case it destabilizes. That's the opposite of comforting. She pressed her hand against the obelisk. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground trembled. A surge of light burst from the cracks, spreading like veins of fire. Aaron felt his hair lift, the air crackling with electricity. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything went still. The obelisk dimmed. The light receded into the soil. Did it work? He asked cautiously. Lyra closed her eyes. Yes. They will search north now. He exhaled in relief. So, what you're saying is? I don't have to explode today. Correct. Perfect. Let's make that a daily goal. They set up camp near a stream that night. Aaron managed to start a fire the old-fashioned way, though Lyra offered several times to ionize the atmosphere for faster results. As they ate, he glanced at her. You ever think about going back? To your world? She looked into the flames. It would not welcome me now. I am anomaly. Yeah, well, Earth isn't exactly big on anomalies either. I once got yelled at for growing mushrooms too close to my potatoes. She tilted her head. You compare exile with agriculture? It's all about the dirt, really. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. You find humor in strange places. It's that or cry, he said, shrugging. And crying makes bad campfire company. The night deepened, stars thick across the sky. Lyra traced constellations with one slender finger, naming them in her own tongue, soft, melodic sounds that made the world feel older. What's that one? He asked, pointing. Vareth, she said. Star of lost travelers. It watches those who run. He chuckled quietly. Figures. Bet it's sick of me by now. Lyra glanced at him, eyes shimmering faintly in the firelight. It does not judge. It waits. The silence that followed was strange but not uncomfortable. The forest hummed softly, alive with unseen energy. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and Aaron threw another log on the fire just to feel grounded. "Hey, Lyra," he said after a moment. "You think the stars ever fall on purpose?" She looked at him, and for a long time, she didn't answer. Then, very softly, she said, "Sometimes they fall because they're lonely." He smiled, though something in his chest tightened. Well, they picked the right forest for that. For the first time that night, she laughed, not the quiet hum of amusement but a full, genuine laugh that carried through the trees like a spark catching dry kindling. And above them, unnoticed, the faint flicker of distant engines stirred against the dark. The hunters had changed course, deceived by Lyra's pulse, but one, smaller and faster than the rest, had begun turning back toward the southern woods. The next morning began with a negotiation that could only be described as diplomatic warfare between a man, a frying pan, and an alien woman with zero understanding of breakfast etiquette. "Lyra," Aaron said carefully, waving the smoking pan like a white flag, "pancakes are not meant to glow. They cook faster with plasma heat," she replied calmly, her elven ears twitching as she tilted her head at the bubbling discs that emitted a suspicious lavender shimmer. "Yes, and so do nuclear reactors, but we don't eat those either. It is efficient. It's a fire hazard. It tastes better. It hums." They stared at each other. The pancakes hummed louder, vibrating faintly like a swarm of caffeinated bees. Aaron sighed, dropped the pan onto the table, and said, "Fine. You win. Breakfast by alien fusion. Just promise me it won't try to communicate this time." "It learned," she said seriously. "Oh great," he muttered, "intelligent carbs." Lyra ate with perfect serenity, every movement graceful, while Aaron chewed suspiciously, half expecting enlightenment or internal combustion. The first bite was surprisingly tolerable, sweet, metallic, with a hint of ozone. The second bite made his tongue tingle. The third convinced him he could now probably receive radio signals. He dropped the fork. "If I start reciting space weather reports, that's on you." Lyra smirked slightly, which was a rare enough event to make him forget the electric fizz in his teeth. "You exaggerate." "That's my thing," he said. "Keeps the universe interesting." When they finished eating, the forest felt unusually still. No wind. No birds. Even the stream's murmur seemed hesitant. Lyra was the first to notice the faint distortion rippling through the air. "They follow again," she said softly. "Define they," Aaron said, instantly wishing he hadn't. "One hunter craft. Small. Stealth variant." The pulse misled the others, but this one recalculated. He rubbed his temples. "Great. We're being chased by the overachiever of interstellar assassins." Lyra was already packing. Her movements were precise, economical, practiced. "We cannot outrun it. But I can confuse it." "Does this involve another explosion?" "Unlikely. You said unlikely last time and I had to regrow my eyebrows. Then be more careful this time." He sighed, slinging his pack over his shoulder. "You know, for someone with hyper-advanced technology, your survival plans sound a lot like chaos with extra sparkle." "Chaos is a form of strategy," she said. They set out deeper into the woods, following the stream uphill. The air shimmered faintly around them as Lyra activated some kind of localized distortion field. Everything outside the shimmering edge seemed slightly bent, like looking through heat waves on summer stone. Aaron couldn't help himself. "So, does this thing make us invisible or just very blurry?" "Both, depending on angle." "Fantastic. I've always wanted to look like a badly tuned television." Lyra ignored him and increased the field's intensity. The trees around them warped gently, colors shifting in soft gradients of violet and teal. He had to admit, it was beautiful in a mildly unsettling way. By noon, they reached a clearing bordered by massive roots, gnarled and intertwined like veins of an ancient creature. Lyra stopped suddenly. "Here," she said. "Energy is strong. I can build interference array." "With what?" She opened her pack and pulled out a mix of broken tech, copper wire, a shard of her ship's hull, and, disturbingly, a spoon. "That's your plan? Alien engineering and cutlery?" She gave him a look. "Tools are tools." "I take it back," he said. "If we survive this, you're redesigning my kitchen." For the next few hours, he helped as best he could, mostly by holding things and occasionally ducking when they sparked. Lyra connected filaments between the roots, shaping a circle that pulsed faintly. Each piece she added made the ground hum louder. The forest responded, light flickering between leaves, a faint rhythm beating under the soil. "What's it doing?" he asked, watching a line of glowing symbols crawl across one of the roots. "Syncing with subterrestrial resonance lines," she said. "Ah, of course," he said. "How could I not guess that?" "You could not." "Yeah, that's the point. When she activated the array, the air rippled. A low hum filled the clearing. For a moment, Aaron felt the oddest sensation, like he existed in several slightly different places at once. Then, just as quickly, it passed. Lyra nodded. Good. It will scramble their sensors for several hours. He stretched, trying to shake off the dizziness. So, in human terms, we've basically built a cosmic signal jammer out of tree roots and spare parts? Yes. He grinned. I'm oddly proud of us. They sat beside the stream afterward, exhaustion settling over them like a blanket. Lyra ran her fingers through the water, eyes distant. Aaron skipped stones, pretending not to notice how the ripples moved in odd, geometric patterns wherever her touch lingered. You know, he said, for someone who fell out of the sky, you've adapted to life in the woods pretty fast. It reminds me of early worlds, she said quietly. Before we built towers that touched the upper atmosphere. Let me guess. You don't miss those towers. They were efficient. But lonely. Yeah, he said softly. I get that. For a moment, neither spoke. The world was quiet again, but not empty, more like it was holding its breath. Then Aaron, ever the master of inappropriate timing, said, So, hypothetically, if you ever needed a co-pilot in one of those towers, do you think they'd let me in? Lyra's mouth twitched. You cannot even operate your wood stove. Exactly. I'd bring chaos. Keep things interesting. Chaos is overrated. You just said it was strategy. Only when I say it. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're impossible. Accurate, she said, deadpan. As the sun dipped behind the trees, they returned to the small camp they'd built beneath an overhang. Aaron gathered wood while Lyra set up small emitters around the perimeter. The devices projected faint waves of iridescent light that curved upward, forming a dome so subtle it looked like a shimmer of heat. He stared at it, impressed. You sure this thing works? Yes. It bends perception. Any being looking this way will see empty forest. Neat. So basically, invisibility bubble. She nodded. Cool. Just don't sneeze inside it, or I'll think the world's ending again. Lyra's gaze softened, amused. You exaggerate to mask fear. Of course I do. It's cheaper than therapy. Later, as they sat by the fire, Aaron took out his old carving knife and began whittling a piece of wood into the rough shape of a bird. Lyra watched silently, fascinated. You create shapes, she said. But why destroy the original? He shrugged. Guess I like making something new out of something simple. That is, inefficient. He smiled. Welcome to humanity. She tilted her head, considering that. It is strange. You build meaning from loss. Yeah, he said quietly. But that's what makes it worth something. She reached out, touching the small carving gently. It's beautiful. Don't sound so surprised. I am not surprised, she said softly. Just reminded. Of what? That beauty and sadness are siblings. He smiled faintly. You really have a way with words. Words are small cages, she said. But sometimes they hold stars. For a long time, they said nothing. The fire crackled. The night pressed close, vast and still. Somewhere far above, beyond the reach of sight, the hunter craft drifted closer, scanning faint distortions in space. Lyra looked up suddenly. It senses anomaly again. Here we go, Aaron muttered. Can't a man enjoy one peaceful existential conversation before doom? She stood, already moving toward the perimeter. It will not find us easily. The interference holds. But it learns. He followed her out, squinting into the darkness. The trees seemed to shimmer faintly, light rippling along branches like veins of energy. You think it knows exactly where we are? Not yet. But it will soon. Then we move again? Yes. But not tonight. Tonight, we let it chase ghosts. He nodded slowly, then glanced at her with a grin. You sure you're not enjoying this a little? Running? She asked, raising an eyebrow. No, outsmarting cosmic murder machines. You seem weirdly calm about it. She gave a small, knowing smile. Perhaps I enjoy the company. He blinked. That's either the sweetest or most terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. Possibly both. He laughed quietly, and she smiled, an unguarded, fleeting smile that made the shadows feel less heavy. The night deepened. The forest held its breath again, unaware that beneath its quiet heart, two worlds were slowly learning how to share the same rhythm. And far beyond the clouds, the hunter's sensors flickered, confused by false echoes and shifting coordinates, until finally it detected a single faint pulse, familiar, ancient, unmistakable. It turned south, engines flaring. Lyra's array had bought them time, but not safety. The stars were beginning to listen again. Aaron woke to a sound he had learned to dread, the faint, rhythmic thrum of Lyra's devices waking up before she did. That was never a good sign. The last time he'd heard it, the cabin had briefly existed in 2 dimensions at once, and he'd had to chase his axe out of a tree that technically wasn't there. He sat up, rubbed his face, and looked across the camp. Lyra was crouched beside a pile of her glowing tech, muttering in her own language, something that sounded like music spoken by static. Sparks arced in soft bursts of violet light. "Morning," he said, yawning. "You building breakfast or the apocalypse today?" She didn't look up. "Neither. The hunter changes frequency. I must adapt." "Ah, adapt. That word again." He stretched his arms. "You ever think maybe we should try the opposite? You know, stop adapting and just take a nap? Sleep is inefficient. I'm starting to suspect your entire species is allergic to rest." Lyra finally looked up, eyes catching the dawn light like fragments of stars. "Rest comes after survival." He nodded slowly. "Right. No pressure." He wandered toward the stream, splashed his face with cold water, and tried to pretend they weren't one bad calculation away from cosmic annihilation. When he returned, Lyra had rearranged her devices into a strange ring, each piece floating inches above the ground. They hummed in unison, emitting a faint blue mist. "Let me guess," he said. "This is another totally safe experiment that definitely won't melt my eyebrows." She tilted her head. "It stabilizes atmospheric distortion. But possibly eyebrows." He sighed. "You're lucky I like you." She blinked. "Why lucky?" "Because I'm starting to think my tombstone's going to say, died of curiosity and poor judgment." He helped her adjust the devices, though help mostly meant handing her things while she worked at a speed that made him feel like a caveman assisting a quantum physicist. She moved with that same otherworldly precision, each gesture sharp and graceful, like she was solving invisible equations in the air. After a while, he said, "You ever miss your ship? You know, the giant cosmic thing that probably didn't humiliate you daily like I do." She hesitated, a rare flicker of emotion crossing her face. "Yes. But it was also lonely." "Funny," he said, smiling faintly. "That's how I used to feel about my cabin." Her ears twitched slightly. "You compare spacecraft to wood hut." "Hey, they both had leaky roofs." Lyra didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I do not regret falling." That stopped him. He looked at her, unsure what to say. "That's oddly poetic for someone rewiring the universe." She didn't look up. "Poetry and science share origin. Both attempt to name the unknown." "Yeah," he said, "but only one gets published in journals." She frowned faintly. "Your world values strange things." "Oh, you have no idea." The ring of devices began to pulse in rhythm, the hum deepening. Lyra adjusted a dial on her wristband, and the air shimmered. For a brief moment, the forest seemed to fold, trees bending inward, the stream twisting like a ribbon caught in wind. Aaron blinked, and it was gone. "Tell me that was supposed to happen," he said. "Yes," she said. "Mostly." "Mostly?" "It created dimensional echo." "And that's good?" "It depends which dimension listens." He groaned. "You know, you could really work on your delivery." Her mouth curved slightly. "Would you prefer I lie? Honestly? Maybe just sugarcoat. Your kind consumes too much sugar." "Touché." They packed their things again by midday. The plan, if one could call it that, was to keep moving until Lyra detected a blind patch, a place where cosmic frequencies couldn't penetrate. Aaron had tried to ask how she could sense frequencies. Her answer involved particles, consciousness, and something called resonant empathy, which only made his head hurt. As they walked, the forest changed. The trees grew denser, taller, their trunks lined with faint veins of glowing fungus. Aaron ran a hand across one and felt warmth, like it was breathing. "Let me guess," he said. "Alien trees?" "Unlikely," Lyra replied. "But they listen differently." "Yeah, I've noticed. I swear that one coughed when I tripped earlier." It laughed, she corrected. "Wait, trees have a sense of humor now?" "Some species do. Humor increases survival." He stopped walking. "Please tell me you didn't just say we're surrounded by stand-up comedians made of bark." Her expression was perfectly serious. "Not all humor is kind." He sighed. "You are absolutely terrifying when you talk like that." They reached a ridge by late afternoon. From there, the land fell away into a misty valley, lush, silent, unbroken. Lyra paused, eyes half closed, as if listening to something beyond sound. "This place hides us," she said finally. "You sure? It hums in the right tone." "Good enough for me." They built a small shelter among the roots of an ancient tree that looked like it had seen galaxies come and go. Lyra placed her devices in a triangle around their camp. The hum of her tech blended with the natural chorus of insects, creating a strange harmony that made the air itself feel alive. When night came, Aaron sat by the small fire, sharpening his knife on a stone. Lyra watched the flames, her expression distant. You know, he said, I've been thinking. If this whole running from space assassins thing doesn't work out, you'd make an excellent scientist/chef. You could revolutionize intergalactic cuisine. She arched an eyebrow. Using plasma heat? Exactly. You'd corner the breakfast market. Try Lyra's quantum pancakes, now with extra hum. She actually laughed, a quiet, melodic sound that caught him off guard. He grinned. See? I'm good for something. You are. Really? Yes. You make the silence less empty. He looked at her, surprised. You keep saying things like that, and I might start thinking you're human. She tilted her head. Is that compliment? Close enough. The firelight flickered across her face, and for a moment, the air between them felt heavy with things neither of them knew how to name. Aaron looked away first, poking the fire unnecessarily. So, he said, trying to sound casual, what happens if we actually make it through this? You got a plan for after? She hesitated. I will repair my ship. I must return to stop them. Stop who? The hunters. They are not hunters by nature. They are collectors. They take what shines. And you? I refuse to shine for them. He nodded slowly. Can't say I blame you. They fell into silence again. The forest whispered faintly, leaves shifting in a wind that didn't seem to exist. Somewhere distant, thunder rolled, not from clouds, but from the sky itself. Lyra looked up. They move closer, she murmured. Aaron groaned. You'd think after all this, they'd give up. They do not understand giving up. Well, he said, forcing a grin, maybe they'll learn it from me. Lyra's gaze softened. You hide fear behind humor again. Would you rather I scream? She considered. No. That would attract wildlife. He chuckled quietly. You really do get me. Before she could answer, a faint flicker of light appeared at the edge of the valley, small, distant, but moving. Lyra's hand went to her wrist device instantly. They found the interference trail. Meaning? They follow echoes. We must erase them. Erase? How? She looked at him, and he could tell by her expression that he wouldn't like the answer. By creating new ones. He sighed. And I assume that means running again. She smiled faintly. Running is efficient. Not for my knees, it's not. Before dawn, they began to move. Lyra's devices left behind flickering afterimages, false readings designed to mislead. The forest shimmered behind them, as though reality itself were rippling apart and reforming. As they climbed the far ridge, Aaron looked back one last time. The valley below glowed faintly with residual light, like the stars had fallen and chosen to rest there. You ever think, he said softly, that maybe this world's starting to like you? Or fear me, she replied. Same difference. That's how most friendships start. She smiled again, that quiet, rare smile that made the universe feel less cruel. Perhaps. The wind shifted. Somewhere above, the hunter ship's sensors swept across the land, searching, waiting. Lyra stopped, placing her hand on Aaron's shoulder. Keep walking, she said. Do not look back again. He nodded. Noted. They moved into the deep forest, swallowed by green light and distance. The hum of her devices faded, replaced by the whisper of leaves and the faint, steady rhythm of two heartbeats keeping time with the same uncertain future. And high above them, in the thin breath between clouds and stars, a machine built to hunt anomalies caught a trace, one heartbeat human, one not, and began to follow. The morning came quiet, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Mist curled between the trees, soft and luminous, and Aaron thought it looked like smoke rising from a dream that hadn't quite burned out. He sat beside the fire, stirring what might generously be called breakfast, a concoction of roots, herbs, and something Lyra had referred to as nutrient lattice. It shimmered faintly. That was never a good sign. You sure this is edible? He asked. Lyra crouched nearby, tightening the straps on her weathered pack. It sustains metabolic integrity. Yeah, but will it kill metabolic integrity first? It depends on your definition of edible. He sighed and poked the shimmering goop with a stick. I miss bacon. I miss stars, she said quietly. He glanced up. Guess we're both homesick for impossible things. The silence stretched comfortably for a while. They'd been on the move for weeks, dodging the flickers of the hunter ships that patrolled the night skies, guided by Lyra's strange devices and his equally strange luck. But now, her machines were dying. The hum that once filled the air had grown weaker, more fragile, like the final breaths of something that knew it wouldn't wake again. How long do we have? He asked finally. She looked at the faint glow pulsing from her wristband. They are closing the circle. One day, perhaps less. Aaron frowned. So, what, we just keep running till they get bored? They do not get bored. Yeah, I figured. He stood, brushing off his hands. Then we need a plan. Lyra tilted her head slightly. You have one? I have the outline of one. The very rough, half-baked shape of one. Half-baked things usually explode. Yeah, he said, smiling faintly. But sometimes they also work. He led her toward the old valley, the one filled with the glowing fungal trees. When they'd passed through before, he'd noticed something, an old cavern, its entrance sealed by stone but humming faintly beneath his hand, like it remembered a different kind of air. When they reached it again, he placed his palm on the cool rock. It vibrated faintly. Told you, he said. This place has potential. Lyra ran a small scanner over the surface, her eyes narrowing. There is a field beneath. Metallic. Ancient. Good ancient or bad ancient? Unknown. Well, only one way to find out. He raised his axe, wedged it between the stones, and grinned. Stand back, scientist lady. She rolled her eyes but did as told. The first strike sent sparks into the air. The second cracked something deep inside the wall. On the third, the rock gave way, splitting open to reveal a vast chamber within, a space carved with symbols that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins. It wasn't built by humans, and even Lyra seemed stunned. This structure predates my kind, she whispered. Aaron whistled softly. So, old. She stepped inside, her hand brushing the strange symbols. It is a resonance chamber. It bends light. Sound. Perhaps even pursuit. So you're saying, we could hide in here? Perhaps. Or vanish completely. Vanishing starting to sound pretty good. They entered deeper, the air thick and electric. At the center of the chamber stood a crystalline pillar, fractured but still glowing with soft light. Lyra approached it like someone approaching an old god. This is starcore material, she said softly. It can warp gravitational signatures. They will lose us here. That's a relief, Aaron muttered. Because I was running out of jokes. She smiled faintly. Unlikely. They began working to stabilize the chamber. Lyra's remaining devices synced with the starcore, their dying hum merging into a low, harmonic tone that resonated through the stone. Aaron could feel it in his bones, like standing too close to thunder. You sure this won't? I don't know, erase us from existence. Uncertain, she said. But probability favors displacement, not disintegration. Oh, good. I always wanted to be displaced. Hours passed as Lyra adjusted frequencies and aligned the machines. Aaron fetched tools, stabilized cables, and tried not to touch anything that glowed. The two of them moved in rhythm, an awkward, accidental symphony between wood and starlight. Finally, Lyra stepped back. It is ready. Aaron wiped sweat from his forehead. So, what happens now? The chamber will bend reality around us. They will not find what they cannot perceive. He looked at her, the faint glow of the starcore reflected in her eyes. And what happens to us? She hesitated. We may remain. Or move between layers of existence. Time will decide. He grinned wearily. You really know how to make a man feel comfortable. Her expression softened. Aaron. Yeah? If this fails, you must run. You have a chance to survive. Not without you. You must. He shook his head. No. Look, I'm no cosmic hero. I'm just a guy with an axe and a bad habit of making stupid decisions. But I made one good decision, and that was not letting you die alone in some crater. So whatever happens, we're finishing this together. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just looked at him, a long, unreadable look filled with something vast and unspoken. Then she reached out and took his hand. Together, then. Yeah, he said softly. Together. The chamber began to vibrate, dust falling from the ceiling. The light grew brighter, shifting from blue to white to a color that didn't exist in human eyes. A hum filled the air, so deep it became silence. Outside, far above the forest, the hunter ships descended. Sleek, black, and merciless, they scanned the terrain with beams of shimmering energy. One by one, they locked onto the valley. Inside, Lyra's devices flared to life. The air rippled, folding inward. The starcore pulsed violently, then burst outward in a wave of light that swallowed the chamber whole. Aaron felt weightless. For a moment, he saw everything, trees bending, mountains curving like paper, stars rearranging themselves into constellations he didn't know. Lyra's hand tightened around his, her eyes glowing brighter than the light itself. Then, darkness. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on grass. The air smelled of rain and ozone. The forest was silent again, untouched. No hunter ships, no hum of machines, just the whisper of wind through the leaves. He sat up slowly. Lyra? She stood a few feet away, looking up at the sky. Her hair shimmered faintly, though her devices were gone. The faint light that used to follow her had dimmed, replaced by something softer, almost human. They're gone, she said quietly. The resonance folded this place. We exist outside their maps. He grinned. So we won? For now. He stretched out on the grass, laughing softly. I'll take for now. That's practically eternal in my book. She turned to look at him, a hint of amusement in her expression. You continue to make light of cosmic events. Hey, it's my coping mechanism. That and pretending I understand what you just said. She walked closer, kneeling beside him. You changed, she said softly. You no longer hide behind humor. Sure I do, he said. I just choose when to. Her hand brushed his cheek, light as static. Your kind is fragile. But you endure. Yeah, he murmured, we're good at that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear, faint at first, then bright, scattered across the night sky like fragments of memory. Lyra tilted her head. Do you think the stars remember? He smiled. If they don't, I'll remind them. She laughed softly. Then perhaps they will fall again. I'll keep a net handy, he said. The night deepened. The forest hummed with quiet life, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no sound of pursuit, no hum of machinery, no tension in the air. Just peace. Eventually, Lyra lay beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. You will die one day, she said matter-of-factly. Yeah, he said, but not today. And I may live for centuries. He smiled. Then you better make them count. She closed her eyes. Perhaps I will. They lay there until dawn, the sky slowly brightening. When the first light touched the trees, Aaron thought it looked almost familiar, like starlight pretending to be morning. And when Lyra finally stood, her eyes reflected that same light, endless and soft. Where to next? He asked. She glanced at the horizon. Everywhere, she said. He stood beside her, taking one last look at the forest that had sheltered them both, the place where a man of wood and an alien of stars had found something neither of them had known they were missing. Then they began to walk, side by side, into the light of a new world that was no longer just his or hers, but something quietly, impossibly in between. And far above them, the stars flickered, as if laughing softly, remembering how once, long ago, they had fallen into a forest and never truly left.